Originally released as a Google Stadia exclusive, Lost Words Beyond the Page is a heartwarming puzzle narrative that finds its way on the consoles and PC this week. While its puzzles leave a lot to be desired in terms of challenge, its message and story leave a worthwhile, memorable impression. If you're new to my channel, make sure you hit that subscribe button, maybe hit the bell icon, and share the video with your friends if you find the video useful. Now let's get into the review, starting with the story. Lost Words is like two stories in one. You play as Izzy, a young girl learning to deal with loss and grief in a situation that most players will be able to relate to. All while this is happening to her, she's writing a story as a coping mechanism to let out her feelings. In her story, you play as the protagonist living in a magical kingdom of fireflies. Sadly, peace in the kingdom doesn't last because it's interrupted by a giant dragon. With the kingdom under fire, you seek to track down the ferocious dragon and gather your stolen fireflies. While Izzy plays the part of the narrator, it's impressive to see how well written her commentary is. After all, the writers behind the game are obviously adults, but they're able to convey the feelings of a child going through loss incredibly well. We see that commentary in the form of a journal that Izzy keeps with her, where we hear her deepest thoughts on what's going on in her life. Those thoughts are paired with magical effects that react to her strongest emotions. At the same time, we jump into Izzy's fictional story that reflects what's going on in the real world with magical elements. Woven together, the two pair wonderfully and show an honest depiction of a child going through loss. Very much like its story, Lost Words juggles two gameplay types between its two stories. While in the real world, you play as a representation of Izzy within her journal's pages. It's presented as a straightforward and incredibly simple platformer. As Izzy narrates her thoughts and what's happening, the playable character platforms over words, occasionally stepping on keywords that change the landscape of the journal. In other moments, breakout words will appear that can be rearranged to solve blank sentences and as platforms themselves. This is about as far as the puzzles go for this particular part of the game. While it works, it feels like it could have been fleshed out a bit more to provide some challenge or at least be a bit more thought-provoking. When the game does jump into its other half, that's the Magical Kingdom story, things do get fleshed out to some degree at least. In these sections, you control the protagonist of Izzy's story, as she uses a magic spellbook to warp the world around her. Like the journal, this world is presented as a platformer as well, only now we can use magic. The magic comes in the form of words that react to the blue highlighted objects in the story. For example, the rise word would lift up objects, while the break word tears them down. These are used to get around obstacles, and while it's a change of pace from the journal moments, it doesn't really flesh out very much either. It would have been great to see moments where we can combine different words for puzzles, or just get more moments where the correct word wasn't so apparent. Maybe an option to use a different word for different branching paths. There's just a lot more that could have been done with this to keep the gameplay part feeling interesting. But I'm also aware that this game is focusing more on story and emotion than its gameplay. For what it's worth, its mechanics are fine. The story truly is what is the focus here, and that's the real reason you should pick this game up. Playing my review copy on PC, the combination of platforming and controlling word platformers with my mouse felt right at home in terms of controls. Lost Words isn't an intensive game by any means, so even though I didn't get a chance to try it out on console, I wouldn't really think this would have trouble running on something like a Nintendo Switch. With that said, Lost Words looks beautiful. When in the real world, you can see the progression of Izzy's journal over time. Her death becomes distress as events of her story unfold. Little details like that help the story feel like it's in a real world that's developing as the story unfolds. In the other half of the game, you traverse lovely looking backdrops across all sorts of different terrains. There's a lush forest, a sandy desert, and a fiery cave filled with molten lava. These areas are beautifully animated, presented in a 2D view but with plenty of action layered up in the background. Much like its story, it's magical. Lost Words cast does an impeccable job at pushing this heartwarming narrative. Izzy's actress can convey her despair, her hope, and most importantly, her confusion in what's going on in her life so perfectly. I think for a story to take on a child as their protagonist, so many factors could have gone wrong in the writing and in the performance. However, that's just not the case here, and ultimately I feel like it's the performance here that helps sell the story as a believable interaction in this situation. Ultimately, Lost Words Beyond the Page is an extraordinary vignette into how loss can affect a child and how one of that young age deals with such a topic. Its gameplay is alright, it's incredibly simple and lacks any challenge, but what it does excel at is interweaving its story into gameplay. Sadly, I don't think that's enough to carry the whole 4-hour game, but if you're not turned off by that, then you'll be rewarded with a wholesome and, more importantly, honest depiction of this life experience. Thanks so much for watching this review. It's a little bit on the short side, but I hope you found it useful and informative. Let me know what you think of Lost Words in the comments down below. Usually I'm a big fan of these story-driven bite-sized games, and while it fits this category, the gameplay felt like fat at times, and that could have been streamlined a bit better. Anyway, I got a few more indie games to get to reviewing, so I'll see you guys in the comments down below or over on the Discord server.